Hello, Roger Royse, cancerpatientlab.org. Thanks for listening to this video. I just want to talk a little bit in this video about my diagnosis and particularly pre-diagnosis. And people ought to learn about what to look for before diagnosis. Now, like I say, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer stage 2B, distal tail, about 2 years ago. It was technically July 2022. Although I got some results in June of 2022. Now, at that time, cancer was the last thing that was on my mind. It was the last thing I expected. And I will tell you that my lifestyle at that time, I exercised a lot. I thought I had a healthy diet. I was vegan. I'd recently gone plant-based whole food, but that was fairly recent. So my diet was primarily carbs, primarily processed carbs, and very high sugar. I also had too much alcohol, not as much as the American Cancer Society is just fine, but too much, I think, for really anybody. I'm not sure that there's any safe amount of alcohol. I had way too much stress in my life. I didn't realize that until I actually got into treatment and people were able to monitor things and test things like cortisol, etc., and blood pressure. I wasn't getting near enough sleep. Sleep was my lowest priority of pretty much anything. And I found out later that I was very deficient in vitamins and minerals. In particular, my vitamin D was low, my vitamin B was low, my selenium was low, magnesium was low. And what I learned later is that is really a recipe for pancreatic cancer. I was doing everything that a person would do if they were trying to get cancer, especially the vitamin deficiency. That's something that pops up almost always in pancreatic cancer, is a deficiency of these vitamins. And it's one of those things that is fairly easily remedied through supplements. Now, I didn't have symptoms. You know, all over my medical reports, it keeps saying symptom-free, right? No symptoms. And it was somewhat of an anomaly to the doctors. They kept saying, gosh, it's so weird. Pancreatic cancer with no symptoms. That's so odd. And the reason why with pancreatic is that it just generally takes a long time before it progresses far enough, especially if it's distal tail, which is what mine was, as opposed to a tumor that's in the head of the pancreas, which will show up earlier. But in a distal tail, the symptoms don't come up until very, very late in the process. In fact, it's probably going to be stage 4 by the time anyone even knows through symptoms that something's wrong. But I did have signs. And these were signs that nobody could figure out. And it started in early 2021. I had stomach pain for a long time. It lasted for 4, 5, 6 weeks, really intense stomach pain. And I went to the doctor 3 times and they kept giving me antacids and said, oh, you've got a history of acid reflux, you know, take these pills, it'll go away. I took the pills, it did not go away. But eventually it just kind of eased up on its own. And I forgot about it. I think now, looking back on it, that what I had was pancreatitis. That's what I think. And I think that's particularly true given the diet I had, this high sugar diet, because you got to get your calories somewhere. And if you're not eating meat or fats, then that doesn't leave much else. So I let it go and I ignored it and it went away and it didn't hurt. So I didn't think about it again until about a year later. So annual physical, February of 2022, and 2 things alerted me. There were 2 things that were noticeable. One, I had an increase in blood sugar to right around the borderline between my fasting blood glucose was at the border of normal and beyond normal range, which they call pre-diabetic, which really scared me because my blood sugar has always been, you know, very good. And I asked the doctor about it, and she said, yeah, it's not so bad, it's just a little high. And I said, why? And she said, could be, who knows, we don't know, could be a lot of different things. Maybe it was those tequila shots you had last night. And I said, well, what do I do about it? She said, well, your A1C is normal, so let's just check it again in 3 months. And I thought, okay, well, we'll do that. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just getting too fat or something. So I consciously lost about 5 pounds, checked it again, and it was even higher. So now I'm clearly in pre-diabetic range in terms of fasting glucose, although my A1C is still good. And again, I asked the doctor, I said, what do we do about this? Well, really nothing. You're kind of doing everything that you can do. You're watching your diet, you're exercising. You're not insulin intolerant, so there's really nothing to do. You're not diabetic, so no answers. And of course, I Googled it, and there's a long list of things that could cause that, one of which is pancreatic cancer, but that seemed so remote and so unlikely and such a terrible thing to contemplate that, of course, that couldn't be it. The other thing I noticed about that blood test at the time was that my CRP was up, that C-reactive protein. It's an inflammation marker. And I asked the doctor about that. And I was concerned because normally that's something associated with heart disease, and I was kind of focused on heart because that runs in my family. And the doctor said, gee, CRP is up, but that could be anything. It's not necessarily your heart. It could be, something else in your body, which is a ridiculous explanation. But for some reason, I accepted it as being something not to worry about because it could be anything. Well, yeah, it can be anything. It can be cancer. And I think that's what caused it to go up. And then here's another one that's a little bit surprising. My cholesterol just dropped super low. And this is something, and maybe it's just theory, but I think it's science. But the theory is that if you do have a tumor, and once it gets active, it starts pulling cholesterol out of your bloodstream. And a lot of cancer patients have super low cholesterol. Now, you'll hear it flipped around on you. I've heard, in fact, I've read several books on this now, and one of the oncologists says that low cholesterol causes cancer because he sees such a close correlation. I think it's the other way around. But in any event, those were some signs that I had. And then at the time, also, again, I noticed vitamin D is low, vitamin B is low, selenium is low, magnesium is low, all the things that you would want to do if you were trying to get cancer. Now, since then, it took me a long time to find doctors that would actually order the test to find out what caused this post-diagnosis. But I know now that not only did I have that going on with me, but I had everything else going on wrong, it seemed like. Microbiome was not where I wanted it to be. So I'm currently taking supplements with a company called Viome to really address any microbiome disturbances that I might have. Mycotoxins, that's really the big one. My mycotoxins were a little bit off the charts. That's mold. So I was getting environmental mold contamination, and the 3 types of mold that they found in my body are the 3 types that are carcinogenic. They are cancer causing. Even the FDA, which is not my friend, will admit that these 3 types of mold are cancer causing. So once I found that, I went on a hunt to eliminate any possible sources of mold in my environment. And that could be water damage. It could, in my case, believe it or not, I found mold in my coffee maker, so I had to get rid of that. But also, it's in the foods that you eat. You find these types of mycotoxins a lot of times in nuts, not so much in the United States, but in other places, in nuts, in stored grains, in moldy coffee. It's a real problem. Mold is just a real killer. I think that was a real contributor to my problems. My heavy metals were high. That tends to go hand in hand with mold, by the way. So I had to eliminate that or track that down. Pathogens, didn't really find much in that case, but H. pylori is the one to watch for pancreatic and other similar cancers. And then finally, genetically, the one thing I'm cursed with, I guess, is that I just genetically am prone to have more visceral fat. That's the fat around the organs. Than most people. So I get DEXA scans now, and I've got that fat, the amount of visceral fat that I have, I've got it down to where I want it to be, but it wasn't easy. And it's not something you would think about, and it's not something that's easy to find. There's 2 kinds of fat. There's the fat around your organs, and then there's the skeletal fat that's, that's outside of the organs. It's the kind around the organs that cause inflammation that make the environment really good for cancer. So that's my personal story. That's how I feel like I got to where I was. I talked to the doctors and I asked my oncologist about this. They don't really have an opinion on this, or maybe they don't care how you got there. It's only their job to fix you, not to know how you got there. But really, I think there's a cause for every effect. And I think these were the causes of my cancer. It wasn't just bad luck. It was all of these factors. And it seemed to me that one of the first things we needed to do to get the ship back righted was to address the underlying causes and make sure that I wasn't going to really get in this problem again. This is Roger Royse. Thanks for watching this video. Tune in for the next one. I'm going to tell you about what my diagnosis was like, and that's a story that you're going to want to hear.